Hey guys, how's it going? Previously on the channel, I want to say 2 years ago, I made some videos on the John Deere 100 series and 200 series. Videos on the 140 as well as the 120. I made them around then too, but I wasn't really a huge fan of the 140 video I uploaded. I really didn't know what I was talking about when I filmed that, so I re-uploaded it recently. Or I fixed it, I made a new one and I re-uploaded it. I do not ever recall on this channel talking about the 300 series. When I say the 300 series, I mean the closed frame 300 series, such as the 300, 312, 314, and 316, as well as 317. 318 and up were actually the open frame tractors. There was the 318, there was a 316 Onan, which I'll talk about later. There was also the 320, 322, 330, and 332. I think the 322 and the 332 were both diesel. I think those were the diesel versions, and the 20 and 30 were the gas versions. I might be wrong on that one, but again, I'm not sure. Anyway, so we are going to get into this. In 1975, John Deere introduced they discontinued the 200 series, the 100 series, such as the 110s, the 112s, the 120s, and the 140s, and they introduced the 200 series. If you don't know what the 200 series are, this is a 200 series. They introduced these later in the years, but this is a 200 series, basically what they would look like. And then over here is a 140, a couple of 140s. They discontinued the 100 series and introduced the 200 series. They also introduced the 300 series. The 200 series was basically the same thing as the 110 and 112, all except for they changed the body style up a little bit, as well as the 200 series. Excuse me. The 200 series had more engine options. You could get a 10 horse, 12 horse, 14 horse, or 16 horse. You could also get an 8 horse in the 200 as well as the 208. And then they introduced as well the 300 series. The 200 series, like I said, was supposed to replace the 100 series, the 110 and 12. The 300 series, I believe, was meant to replace the 140s and 120s. I think it was mainly just the 140 because later on they ended up changing the 140 up to replace them to, I guess, phase out the 120. Basically, with the 300 series, you could get a 300, 312, 314, 316, and 317. Later on, they introduced the open frames, which had Onan engines, and they also had a couple that were diesel. I think the diesels they used were Yanmar. I think. I might be wrong on that one. But again, I think they were Yanmar. The 300 series, they did not have H3 like the 140s did. They actually had H2. Some of the models had H2 on them. Some of the other models, such as the 312 and the 314, had H1, which is this right here. H2, you could have a snow plow on the front. You could lift and lower the plow as well as angle the plow. As you can see, I have 4 hydraulic ports on the front of this like a 140 would have. And also, you could use that to lift and lower a rear attachment, such as a sleeve hitch, or I believe you could get a 3-point on. I think you could get a 3-point on one of these, like you could the 140. You just didn't have a slot for the rear hydraulics. And as you can see right there, there is a lift lever for a sleeve hitch in my 312. I should have pulled the 312 out so you guys could look at it as well. Tire sizes you could get for the 300 series was 23, 10, 50, 12 in the rear, 16, 6, 58 in the front. I think that was for all of them. They may have had narrower tires on the 312s, but I'm not sure. I'll get into the 312s here later. I wish I had a 300. I don't have a 300. The 300, I think the 300 and the 314 were the first 300 series they introduced. I might be wrong. Later on down the years, in 77, they discontinued the 300 and they introduced the 316. The 300 was basically the exact same thing as a 316, all except for the numbering. I can't think of anything that was different. I think sometime Deere changed their numbering setup, so it would say, well, this is how many horsepower it had. They want, instead of 300, they wanted 316 so that it would say the horsepower the tractor was. That's what my guess is, but I'm not sure. But it was basically the exact same thing as a 300, or 316 was the same thing as a 300. So you're looking at a 300 right now. But they discontinued the 300 and introduced the 316. I mean, everything was the exact same, from the side panels to the motor to the seat to the steering wheel to everything that came with the tractor. There was nothing different between the two that I have found. So if you're looking for a 300 and can't find one, settle for a 316. The 316, however, is the 316 Kohler model is kind of rare. They only made these 1 year. I can't think of how many they made. I don't think they made very many of them. But again, I'm not sure on that one, and I can't exactly say whether they made a lot of them or made a few of them. The 316 as well as 300, they had dual brake pedal, as you can see right there. Dual brake pedal, dual hydraulic. They had the Sunstrand 15U with the Dana rear end, kind of like what the 140 had from 1971 all the way to 1974. They had the Dana rear end as well as the Sunstrand 15U. The only thing I don't like about the 300 series is you don't get a dipstick for the transmission, as you can see, because of the gas tank. Instead, you get this. That right there is where you fill your transmission with fluid. That right there is where you look and see how much fluid you have, but as you can see, you can't really tell how much fluid there is there, especially when that tube starts changing color. And over the course of time, that tube would rot off, and well, you'd have to replace your fluid, because you'd come out here to the shop one day and all your fluid would be on the floor. I've had it happen. If you can't tell, I'm not very thrilled. So yeah, you could get a 38 or 39 inch deck for these, or you could get a 47. I believe you could get a 50 inch, but I think that was for the later 300 series, such as the 318 and up. They also had the 312 and 314. The 312 and 314 were the same, all except for the engine. The engine on the 314 was a 14-horse Kohler, obviously, where the engine on the 312 was, you guessed it, a 12-horse Kohler K301. The engine on the 314 was a K321, not 341. The motor in the 300 and 316 was a Kohler K341 for the 16 horse. The 314 and 312 were both H1. As you can see, this is H1. They had a single brake pedal. Now hold on a second. Before you go down there and start typing that nasty comment, yes, this tractor has dual brakes. I did that myself. So before you go writing me nasty comments, this is not factory. This is off of A140. So just so you know. So yeah. The 300 series compared to the 140 has a 3.5 gallon fuel tank, where the 140 only had a 1.5 gallon fuel tank. But I mean, basically the styling of the 300 series was the same as the 200 series at the time. The 140 had the same bumper as a 300 series. The 120 did as well, as you can see. The 314 had side panels. I believe the side panels on the 314 were the same as the side panels that went on the 316 and the 300. I don't know if that is correct. I do not think it is, but I might be wrong. But yeah, this is the 312. Some of them came with front hydraulics, some of them didn't. I think the ones that came with no front hydraulics were a little more rare than the ones that came with front hydraulics, because more people probably didn't necessarily need or necessarily didn't want to have a tractor that had the front What? Let's try that again. I think the front hydraulic ones are a little more common than the tractors that don't have front hydraulics, because I can imagine more people wanted to have front hydraulics so as they could lift and lower, let's say, a snowplow. You couldn't necessarily, it wasn't H2, so you couldn't angle the blade. All you could do was lift and lower it. But I do believe that more people wanted hydraulics than not. So I think this tractor is a little more rare. Again, I'm not going to say whether it is or not, because I don't know. 314 and the 312, well, actually just the 312 as far as I know, did not have an amp meter, as you guys can see right there. This tractor does not have an amp meter. It is just a plug. The 316, 300, and the 314, I believe, as well as the 317, I'll get into them in a minute, had the amp meter as well. And now I hear people saying, oh boy, let's hear about the 317. We've already heard about these. We don't care. The 317 was introduced in 1979. They introduced it after they discontinued the 316. This is in 1978. They discontinued the 300 in 77. They discontinued this in 78. This tractor is also, they brought the 312 around in 77 and discontinued them in 78. Something cool about these two tractors while I'm thinking about it, this tractor here, as you can see, that is a dealer tag. I don't know how well you can tell, but this tractor is actually all original, for those of you who didn't know. You can't really tell, but that is a dealer tag, and I looked at it, and it is the exact same place that this tractor has on it. That's a dealer tag as well. And I looked at both of them, and they both say the exact same information on them, which I thought was really cool. So I have two tractors that came from the exact same dealership, which I thought was actually really cool. The 317 was introduced in 79, like I said. It was basically the exact same thing as a 316, all except for it had a 317. All except for it had a Kohler KT17 engine. The KT17 wasn't a, they weren't very good. I'm just going to put it that way. When Kohler designed the KT17, they kind of made it has a splash lubrication in it. What I mean by that is, like in a single cylinder, they had the little splash that would go down off the bottom of the piston rod, and that would splash oil around and cause it to go everywhere in the block, and that would keep the engine oiled. Well, they put a splash lubrication oil system in the KT17, at least the Series 1. So on the 317, you would go onto the side of a hill, and you would be mowing sideways on the tractor, or you would be using that, or you'd be snow plowing with it at an angle. I don't think that was very common, but I might be wrong. Going down a hill or on the wrong side, one piston is getting oil while the other piston is not getting any oil. They also did not have oil fittings oiling things, whatever they're called, in the piston rods, so oil didn't necessarily get to them all too well. Basically, the KT-17 started for oil, and they were very common to blow rods. I actually used to have a 317 on my channel. I worked on it and found out it had a bad piston rod. I was originally going to rebuild the motor and put a new piston rod in it and get it running again. However, after looking into it further, and to split the block, you basically have to take everything off of it and split the block in half in order to be able to change the rod, which really seemed kind of overkill to me. So I didn't end up doing it. I ended up selling the tractor, kind of just out of, well, I had no point in having it sit around here, and I wasn't too interested in messing with that motor at the time. If I'd have thought about it, I'd have kept the tractor, I'd have parted it out or found an engine for it and used it. That is actually why I bought this 312, for those of you who didn't know. I bought this tractor for the engine. Originally, I was going to take the motor out of it and put it in that 317. But after I looked at it a bit further, it wouldn't have worked because it had the wrong engine mounts, as well as the plate, or the way this engine mounts to that bracket that goes down there, it wouldn't have worked. So that's what saved this 312 from being parted out, for those of you wondering. So yeah, that is basically the 300 series, the closed frame 300 series. Oh, in 1981 or 82, John Deere started using the Kohler KT-17 Series 2. The Series 2 had I think it was a pressurized lubrication system. Somebody go down below in the comment section and correct me, because I know I'm wrong. They had a pressurized lubrication system, and they re-engineered the engine a little bit to make it lubricate itself a little bit better than the Series 1 did, such as they put a hole in the crankshaft so that the oil would go through it and get into the piston rods and keep them oiled. I think they also did something to keep it so that oil wouldn't just go to one side of the block or the other side of the block. I don't know what they did exactly, but I know they improved it quite a bit to make it run better. There are some 317s out there still that have the original KT-17 Series 1, but I don't believe they're as common because people did return their 317s. They also put a notice out and would replace the KT-17s and switch them over to a Series 2. I've heard rumor before, actually, about that all they would do is replace the crankshaft and the camshaft in them, and then they were Series 2, from what I heard. I don't know if that was true or not, but I have heard that. And then later on, they made the 316 Onan as well as the 318. The 318 originally had a P2 or a B43G Onan engine, and then eventually later on they changed it to the P8 to the Onan P218. That's what it was. 316 originally had a 16 horse in it, the Onan version. They ended up switching it over to, it was basically the exact same thing as a 318. They put the P218 engine in that, and they started using that. It was basically the same thing as a 318, like I said, all except for it was H1, as well as it had only one brake pedal. The 318 had a little display right here in the dash tower, and it would show you the battery, if the battery was charging, had a gas. It had a light in it that I would say it was out of gas, had a oil pressure light there. That was your gauge cluster, basically. And there was a few other things as well that were different. I can't exactly think of what. Like I said, I've never really owned, messed with, or been around a 318 or a newer 300 series, the open frame. I've watched them on YouTube, but watching them on YouTube isn't the same as, looking at them in person and really going over them and really looking at them for yourself, such as what I've done with this tractor, this one, and the rest of my tractors. Personal preference between the open and closed frame tractors, honest to God, if I had to pick which one was my favorite, I would go with the closed frame 300 series, such as this 316, the 312, the 300, and the 314, because you could take a sleeve hitch off of the back of a 100 series or 200 series, as well as the 140, and you could swap it onto the back of a 300 series like this. I've also had people ask me what is my favorite tractor. Honest to God, I would have, when it comes to the old classic Deeres, I would have to go with the 140 is my all-time favorite garden tractor. Because, they were the original hydrostat tractor when it comes to Deere, as well as they had a lot behind them. They were used in the military. They were also used for the custom color tractors, kind of like my blue patio right there. They had a lot of really cool history behind them. There was a lot of really cool stuff about them. And, my dream tractor, however, is a Cub Cadet 3208. I have one into that before, and I'm sure nobody cares. So anyway, besides that, so yeah, because you can switch, like I said, you can put a sleeve hitch on the back. You could also put a 3-point hitch on one of these, and I think you could put rear hydraulics on one of these if you wanted to, but I think you had to install a valve. You would install a valve on the side of your thing. My 317 had that actually. It mounted right here, and 2 lines would go in here and a line would go in there, and then that line would run back to your hydraulics back here, and that's what lifted and lowered your 3-point and rear hydraulics. The tiller that would go on the back of a 300 series would also work on a 140. Unless the 140 had a Sunstrand 15. If it was a Sunstrand 15 and not a Sunstrand 15U, or here, let me give you a year range. 1970. If it's a 1970 140 and it has a rear tiller, it will not. Actually, it's a different drive shaft, but it will work. However, the drive shaft is different. The tiller from all the 140s will work on the back of a 300 series. However, if you have a 1970 or older John Deere 140, the rear PTO will not work. If you have a 140 that is 1971 and newer, it will work. However, because this had the same rear PTO in it as the 300 series. Because, like I said, they used the Sunstrand 15U in the later 140s. So, yeah. I want to thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. I'm sure you want to see underneath the hood on this. I hope you guys learned something from this. Just kind of me, going over it and showing it off. This is basically what evolved from the 140. This would have been the 140, but, like I said, they switched it over to the 300 series, and they added some more options to it. If you have a 314, you basically have a 140 if you have an H1. If you have an H1 140, you basically have a 314. 314 was H1, and it had a 14-horse Kohler with the Sunstrand 15U. Same with the 140. The 140 had a 14-horse Kohler and a Sunstrand 15U. So yeah, and H1. I want to thank you guys for watching. I can't really think of anything else to include in this video. So So yeah, I want to thank all you guys for watching. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. If you're new to my channel, please consider hitting that subscribe button. It doesn't cost you guys a thing, and it tells YouTube that surprisingly people like my videos, and it tells me that you guys want to see more. And also hitting that like button, you know, tells you, apparently, hitting the like button, it doesn't matter if you hit the subscribe button, apparently. Hitting the like button and leaving a comment on the video tells YouTube that you guys like the video and you guys like seeing this type of stuff and want to see more, and you're suggested, believe it or not. I didn't know that until I was told that, and I researched it and I found it out myself. So yeah, subscribers I don't think necessarily matters. What matters is, you know, what you talk about, how many people hit the like button on your video, and also comment down below. I don't know about the dislike button. I don't know what the dislike button helps, but they don't show it anymore to tell you how many dislikes you have, which really bothers me. It really pisses me off they got rid of that button, but, you know, oh well. Apparently people get offended by their own shadows anymore, so, oh well. All right, guys, I think that's going to be it. I really appreciate you guys coming out here to the shop and hanging out with me today. And I will see all of you in the next video. Take care, guys. Bye. You know, I just thought of something my dumbass forgot to mention in the video. The 312 actually, believe it or not, had no headlights when they came out of the factory. I think they were optional, but most of the tractors came with no headlights. I also believe the 314 was the same way, but I'm not too sure about that one. I think the 312 was basically the base model 300 series you could get. No side panels, no headlights, maybe front hydraulics. You know, they were kind of the lower end of the barrel tractor you could get. That's kind of what I thought, or kind of what I think. I don't know. So yeah, I figured I'd add that before I forgot.